So the tour is Dom Joly's Holiday Snaps. First question then, how's the tour going? Are you pleased with it?
Well, it's just so exciting to be back out. I was in the middle. Well, I started this tour 16 months ago, and I was sort of 20 gigs in and really getting it, nailed. And then suddenly, like everyone, Boris announced we all had to go home, and I've just sat at home for 16 months. The tour itself is about my travel because I'm not. Most people probably know me as a comedian, but I've written 4 travel books and I've been to 106 countries, and that's honestly my main passion, really. And so there's been nothing worse than being a travel writer in the middle of a pandemic. The furthest I tried, I went to Gloucester once. That was quite exciting.
And the anecdotes that come out of your travel, are they what actually happened? Or as a comedian, do you have to amplify it and go off into flights of fantasy to get the laughs?
Well, in the tour or in the books? In the books, it's quite interesting because actually travel writing, everything happens that happens to me. Really, I just go off on adventures, whether I'm going to North Korea or Chernobyl or skiing in Iran, or I become a monster hunter and go after looking for the Yeti, or in my last book, I walked across Lebanon. So all the things happen. But I think, I can't remember what the quote is about being a travel writer. Sometimes you have to compile events into a funnier story, and obviously everything's slightly heightened. But no, really, I do just manage to get myself into a lot of trouble. And that's one of the great things about being a travel writer, actually, is that normally when you go on holiday, you're just hoping everything goes well. For me, if everything goes badly, then I just have a good holiday. But frankly, that's really dull. Like, no one wants to hear about you sitting on a beach or having a nice time at a bar. So for what most people find terrible things happening on holiday, for me, the worse, the better, because I'm just thinking, I was in the Congo, which is a lot of the places I go to sound dangerous, but actually I've had a great time, and people are so pleased that you've come there for some other reason than to sort of talk about a terrible situation. But the Congo was one place that particularly I was going after a monster called the Macalian Bembe, and I won't go into details, but it really was quite a traumatic trip. And all the time I could think, if I don't die on this, God, it's going to make a good book, which is not a great way of looking at stuff. But yeah, so no, it's about that. And I've always had travel in my comedy. I did a show called Well Shut Your Mouth after Trigger Happy, where I basically went around the world doing Trigger Happy stuff and frightening Inuits and doing stuff for the Great Wall of China and stuff. So it is basically like your dull neighbor who goes off to Norfolk to do some brass rubbings, and he knocks on your door and says, "Do you want to see my photos?" I say no to him, but my photos and clips, I think, are a bit better. I hope, anyway.
Yeah, of course. So obviously your TV career has created series which have sold all around the world. Does that mean that not wherever you go, but the majority of places you go, people make life easier because they recognize you, or do they not bother?
No, I think most of the time I'm not recognized, actually, because Trigger Happy, which is the one that really sold, to 80 countries, I don't think people really, unless I'm holding a big, massive phone, which is there, then maybe. But no, normally not. But the worst thing is actually when I'm traveling around the world and people ask me what I do. The worst thing is, like, if you're stopped by the police in some place and they go, "What's your profession?" and you say comedian, they're like, they cuff you and put you in the back. They think you're taking the mickey. But the real annoying thing is wherever I go in the world, everywhere from Syria to the Congo, when I say I'm a comedian, they go, Mr. Even in North Korea, Mr. Bean. And I go, no, sadly, not Mr. Bean, no. So I think the secret, if you want to be an internationally recognized comedian, is to make silent comedy. Because that's one, Mr. Bean's very good, but one of the reasons it's worked so well is because you don't need to translate it, and it just works visually all around the world.
Yeah. Although, of course, you could probably do your shows yourself in several different languages, because I was reading up on how many languages you speak, and it's very impressive. You were born in the Lebanon. You spoke about walking across there. 27 days it took. Yeah. Every step of the way, did you feel, I'm connecting with my past? This is my heritage. This is where I belong. Or was it, so long ago that it was just another country?
Oh, no, it was, every step of the way, I was just thinking, God, why did I do this? This is very steep, really. But no, it was just odd. I'm not Lebanese, but I grew up there because my mum was in the Foreign Office. It's complicated how we ended up there for various reasons. But both my parents were massive travelers, and really my dad was sort of amateur archaeologist. He was a novelist. We used to go off into the desert looking for ruins, and we'd travel all over the place. So, and the people that we met at the house in Lebanon were always foreign correspondents and spies, and just really interesting people. So travel was always in my blood. But the weird thing, and this is how I start my show, is that just as I got to the age about 8, 9, when I was starting to think, great, I can do some traveling now, and the first thing I'll do is explore this amazing country, even though there's a civil war going on. The civil war started, and Lebanon just descended into chaos, and I was stuck above Beirut. And really, I lived there for 5 years during the war, and I didn't go anywhere. So it was a bit like the pandemic, really. And so I kind of always felt, and then I came to England. So I always felt, much as I'm attached to Lebanon, that I'd never really explored it like my parents had, or even my brothers and sisters. So for me, it was a real voyage of discovery. And the book was supposed to be a love letter to Lebanon, because I think I've slightly milked going to dangerous places. And actually, the moment anyone thinks about Lebanon, they think it's dangerous. And it's not. There hasn't been a war there since 1990. It's going through some terrible times right now financially. But it's the most beautiful country. It looks like the south of France. From my house, I could ski in an hour, go to the beach in an hour, and people don't realize that about it. My only problem is I called the book the Hezbollah Hiking Club because I thought it was a catchy name. As it was, it meant it couldn't be sold in Lebanon. I've had people arrested in airports thinking it's some sort of Hezbollah training manual. So I've just had to re-release it in paperback, and it's now called the Downhill Hiking Club, which is it's the same book, but actually it's a better name, the Downhill Hiking Club, because obviously it's also about the fact that I'm on the wrong side of 50, and it's all that kind of stuff.
Great. Well, you and I are very privileged in that we're both patrons of Ataxia. The one thing I haven't done yet is go on Beat the Chaser and win money for Ataxia, and it's a substantial amount that you won. Now, you must have been approached by a lot of charities in the past. So why devote your appearance on Beat the Chaser to Ataxia as above any other charity?
Well, Ataxia is very close to me, because I have my daughter's best friend from when she was 0, her brother. So basically, my daughter, my wife met another mother when they were both pregnant, and they both had daughters at the same time, and they've been best friends for 21 years now, which is crazy. And this girl's brother was diagnosed with Friedreich's ataxia, which is it's a pretty rare form of ataxia, and it's a very horrible disease, and not much is known, or there isn't any cure, there's nothing, and there's not much publicity around it as well. I mean, it doesn't help that Friedreich's ataxia has such a terrible name. I mean, most people can't even spell it, so it is an issue. And so she was the mother, I'm very good friends with, is always telling me, I wish we could raise some awareness of it. I mean, Rankin did some stuff for ataxia and for Friedreich's ataxia, but it is a very difficult thing. People don't know about it, and sadly, I think one of the reasons is people don't live massively long, and so you don't get many well-known people with it who then are in the public eye and that sort of stuff. So I just thought, if I am going to do something for something, I really wanted to do something. A lot of charities are represented by people way more famous than me, and I just thought that this one would be good because people don't seem to know about it, and also because I had a personal interest in it. I just thought it really could be something I could hopefully at least raise awareness. And what's been brilliant since I did the show, and I've done some other stuff, and I always mention Friedreich's ataxia and ataxia, people are just so happy that ataxia is put into some form of spotlight, and that people talk about it. In fact, at the gig, I did a gig in Monmouth last night, and someone came up and just gave me a bottle of gin and said, "Thank you very much." I don't do it for gin, obviously, but I will do it for gin. and gave me a bottle of gin and just said, "Thank you very much." I hadn't asked her to, and she just said she had a relative who had Friedreich's ataxia, and that no one ever talks about it. So she was just really chuffed with it. So stuff like that makes a lot of, it's really good, and I think it helps people. But more importantly, I just think I want money to go into, trying to find some sort of cure or some sort of some research. So that's why I did it.
If you ever manage to come to the conference once we get back to normal, as opposed to doing it virtually, I think you'll be amazed at how much of a family it is, whichever type of ataxia it is. People do feel that it's us against them in terms of the publicity war, because so many charities out there try to get publicity. Many have got far greater resources than ataxia, and so succeed a lot better. Had you heard of ataxia before your friend's brother was, or the son of your friend, the brother of your daughter's friend.
That's right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Had you heard of it?
I'd never heard of it. Never heard of it at all. And I'd certainly never heard of Friedrich's ataxia. And, you know, I'm aware of that. I'm aware so much of, I'm a patron of Save the Children as well, because my other interest is the Middle East, and Save the Children do a lot of stuff for refugees in Lebanon. So I was helping them. And when you work for charities, actually, sometimes it is a bit weird how competitive they are with each other. It's almost like, oh, Oxfam did that, you know, and they're beaten to us. And surely we should all be moving towards the same direction. I mean, I even feel guilty singling out Friedrich's ataxia as opposed to, you know, because there are lots of different types of ataxias, but it's just because it's the one I know, and it's the one that really affects me. So I'm really sorry, but I hope that by raising awareness about Friedrich's ataxia, it also does stuff for ataxia in general, because, you know, there are lots of it. I mean, I'm really, frankly, very ignorant about the whole thing. I'm aware of what can happen and what the symptoms are of Friedrich's ataxia. I also know these, I don't know if this is the same with other ataxias, but with Friedrich's ataxia, the chances, I think the reason the boy has it is because both parents were carriers, if you like, had this gene, and the chances of them meeting and having a child, is so extraordinary. And of course, the sister had the same chances of having it. She didn't get tested, and it looks like she hasn't got it. It's the randomness of it all that's so terrifying, I think, and horrible. And so I think the more people learn about it, the better.
And you've actually hit on one of the dilemmas for a lot of people and families with ataxia, whether to be tested or not. Do they want to know what might be coming around the corner, or do they want to live in ignorance?
I didn't know if that was, I didn't know that was a common thing. I was surprised actually that the sister didn't want to know. I think I probably would want to know, but obviously it's her choice. I didn't realize that was a common thing, but again, what a terrible choice. Do you live in ignorance and kind of try and enjoy it, but it's always nagging away at you, or do you it's horrible. I mean, it's something you wouldn't wish on anyone.
Well, it's been great talking to you on behalf of everyone at Ataxia. Thank you for the sum that you raised that beat the chaser, and thanks for trying to raise the profile. Hopefully we'll see you at the conference one year. In the meantime, you have a busy time because you're on tour again, Dom Joly's Holiday Snaps. Hope it goes excellently well for you, Dom. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, and good luck everyone at the conference, and hopefully I'll definitely try and come along one year.